right, football fans, we have another crossover Thursday conversation ahead, but it's not just any regular crossover Thursday. No, this is an NFL divisional round playoff crossover Thursday. One of the most exciting games of the weekend between an excellent team in the Cincinnati Bengals and then, of course, my team, the Tennessee Titans. I am Tyler Rowland, got Jake Lisco, James Rapian from the Locked On Bengals podcast. We're going to be getting you guys ready to go for this game. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans and the Locked On Bengals podcast your first listen every day. Big announcement. The Peacock and Williamson NFL podcast is going on the road to LA for Super Week. Follow the Peacock and Williamson NFL show today to get the most comprehensive coverage of the big game. It's free and available on all platforms. But fellas, thank you for joining me here to talk about this game. Like I said, it's a very exciting matchup. And really, we got to start with the Cincinnati Bengals offense. I mean, just absolutely fantastic to watch. Tons of talent all over the place. An ascending quarterback in Joe Burrow, who, in my opinion, is definitely a top 10 quarterback and working his way to being a lock top 5 guy, depending on, obviously, what happens this weekend and going forward. But I want to talk about keeping Burrow upright. Now, I know that he's been sacked 55 times this year, and through that, he's still been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But the Tennessee Titans do things a little bit different with their pass rush. They're definitely a twist and stunt-based defensive line. They don't do a lot of just straight rush one-on-one. That's not how they win. So I guess my question for you, we know that the Bengals offensive line has struggled with pass protection. It hasn't killed the team, though. So what are your guys' takes on how the offensive line holds up against a straight rush, against how they handle twists and stunts? Do you think that the Titans' philosophy there is going to give them any more trouble than normal, or it's just, business as usual for the Bengals offensive line?
I think it'll depend on which guys are dealing with the twists and stunts, Tyler. The left side of the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line, Jonah Williams and Quinton Spain, a little bit more senior in terms of experience, especially Quinton Spain, of course, is a veteran at this point. Jonah Williams
Former
on
Titan.
his rookie deal still. Yeah, you guys know his work well. He's playing closer to the Titans level than the Bills level at this point, especially as a pass blocker. The snatch trap has been a joy to watch this year from him putting defensive linemen on their faces. It's just really funny to see that happen at any point in time. But those two guys have a really good relationship at this point in terms of handing off stunts and twists between the two of them. I think Trey Hopkins has gotten back more and more to his pre-ACL form as well. He tore his ACL last January for the early part of the season, was certainly dealing with those effects, and more recently has looked a lot more healthy. On the right side, the guys are just inexperienced between Isaiah Prince and Hakeem Adeniji. And at times, stunts have been an issue for them, especially against the Raiders, for example. There's one example that stands out to me where Isaiah Prince doesn't get enough depth in his set. He doesn't set vertically enough. He kind of doesn't get deep enough in the pocket to give Hakeem Adeniji an option to pass off his guy. So the defensive end crashing upfield on Hakeem Adeniji is to a point where if he's past Isaiah Prince, essentially. He's deeper than Isaiah Prince. There's no way to hand that off on the right side. Right. Crosby loops around. They get a sack that way. But that said, I mean, the Raiders don't blitz a lot, they don't blitz at all. I think they blitzed once in that game. A lot of just beat your man style stuff from the Raiders, especially with Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue. But there were some twists and stunts in that game. And the Bengals dealt with it pretty well. I'd say that where you can bother the Bengals protection the most is when you get a free rusher up the middle. You confuse protection, get them to full slide one way or the other, especially if they're not in a split back look, especially if you're dropping a creeper in there, you're sugaring A gaps or doing anything like this, anything exotic with your front. And at times you can get a free rusher, but at the same time, that's really been cleaned up, I think, as the season's gone on. It's become less and less frequent. And Joe Burrow, to his credit, has become much better, especially in the last 6 weeks, at evading guys in the pocket, extending plays and making plays when those free rushers come. So
can I just say, Jake, real quick, I was rewatching that game, and there's maybe you remember it from the end zone view, but there's a specific rush where the pocket's kind of collapsing on Burrow. He literally jumps with 2 feet through to a new spot up in the pocket and then gets out to the right side. And I had to clip it and just for my own private collection and just be like, man, this is just absolute elite pocket movement. That was just absolutely incredible stuff.
The pocket movement has really taken a huge step in the right
Yep.
direction, I think, for Burrow. Looks a lot more like LSU Burrow than especially early this season when he was dealing with the knee and the Bengals were trying to protect him a little bit more, doing more run game. And lately it's been a lot more let Joe cook in most situations.
Yeah. James, I guess I can ask you this next question here. So, Joe
Yep.
Mixon was third in the NFL in rushing. He had 1,205 yards. But the Bengals, as an offense overall, were only 23rd in yards per game with 102.5. What is the disconnect there between Mixon having the third most rushing yards in the league, but the Bengals as a team not really ranking very highly in the rushing game?
I think part of it is, the last probably 6 weeks of the regular season, maybe it's 5 to 6 weeks. It kind of oddly correlates with when Joe Burrow took off and
Right.
took another step. It felt like athletically off the knee, and it just seemed like the passing game took a step. But they haven't been able to run the ball, consistently. Last week, Joe Mixon, I think, averaged 2.8 yards per carry against the Raiders. And so that is something. I mean, going into this game against the Titans, I think it's pretty simple. Joe Burrow is going to have to be the main source of offense. It's going to be on his right arm. It's not going to necessarily be on Joe Mixon's legs. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to run the ball with Mixon or hope to average, 4 a carry or league average or something like that. But if anybody in Cincinnati, at least, is expecting Mixon to carry them to victory, I think that's unrealistic. And it ties back to your first question that Jake answered. The interior specifically of the Bengals offensive line, it's not winning, right? It's not going to win enough in the run game. I think they're better pass blockers than maybe they've been given credit for, and Burrow can hide some of that. But yeah, I think part of it is that they're just not as good running the ball as they were earlier in the year. Part of that also could be with just all of the let's see, we got 4 starting right guards throughout the season. Riley Reif was at right tackle to start the year and was playing well and is a veteran. So part of it is certainly that. But, they'll run it. I think Mixon will probably still have 15 carries on Saturday. But it's going to come down to Joe Burrow's arm for sure.
Well, you can tell the way that Zach Taylor is manufacturing the run game, all of those perimeter runs. He doesn't want the interior offensive line going up against interior defensive lines. He's getting them out on the perimeter, pulling them out to take on DBs. I think that's really smart, which leads me to my next question about the way that Zach Taylor is manufacturing the passing game. So the Bengals led the NFL this year. They had 21 touchdowns of 20-plus yards or more. What is Zach Taylor doing in the passing game to get these guys open all the time?
Oh, there's nothing Zach Taylor's doing. I want to come back to this.
Okay.
I think that you're referring to the Raiders game when the Bengals tried to attack the perimeter quite a
Very
bit.
perimeter-based run
Yeah,
game. Yeah.
that was the same as Week 11 against the Raiders. They found success with the toss game, lead toss, crack toss. They found success with the jet sweep game in that game. I think you'll probably see them get back to more wide zone. This team still majors in wide zone. They did not major in wide zone last week against the Raiders, so we'll see what kind of holds true. I think with a penetrating defense that the Raiders presented them last week, they were trying to go more gap based, get outside and punish the uphill or downhill penetration from the Raiders defensive line. We'll see if that's still the case this week or not. I expect them to try to do a little bit more wide zone, but at the same time, it depends how much they want to put Burrow in gun, because the reason they're getting that ball downfield and they're so explosive is nothing to do again with Zach Taylor. It's Jamar Chase. If you press Jamar Chase, if you press up on Jamar Chase and you're single high, if you're cover one and you're pressing on the outside, the ball's going to Jamar Chase 95% of the time, and he's just going to try to get an outside release and get vertical on you. And he's shown a knack all year to get that late separation. Joe Burrow's been deadly accurate. I think you mentioned this in your show yesterday, Tyler, the back shoulder. Maybe it wasn't your show. Maybe I'm confusing shows. The back shoulder throw to Jamar Chase has been great this year. And then T. Higgins in the last 6-7 games has really stepped up and has started mossing dudes. Wasn't as present against the Raiders. It was a very Jamar Chase focused offense, I'd say, in that game by comparison. But T. Higgins is going up over guys, winning 2-on-1s, beating double teams, and just using his size the way you would expect T. Higgins to use his size when you draft T. Higgins. So I think that's been a big element as well. Both of those guys are winning downfield in different ways.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and you could see that. I want to move to the defensive side of the ball for the Bengals. They were fifth in the NFL in run defense, 102.5 yards per game, or I'm using the defensive stat there, but they were the fifth best rushing rushing defense in the NFL. But the yards per carry is 17th best in the NFL at 4.3. So is that just a simple nature of teams can't run the ball a lot against the Bengals because the Bengals get up and they have that explosive offense? Or what do you think? Kind of like with the offense, we're seeing some good stats, but some bad stats. What's the kind of the disconnect there between total yardage or yardage per game and then yards per carry?
Yeah, they've been really good against the run for most of the year. Now, last week against Josh Jacobs, that wasn't necessarily the case, and the good news for them is they were leading, so the Raiders couldn't necessarily commit to the run.
Right.
But regular season wise, I'm trying to think here. It's outside of, I think it was week 8 against the Browns, where Nick Chubb ran all over them.
He had a 70-yard touchdown run though that kind of they had 155 rushing yards in that game, and 70 came on one play.
Yeah, but it was, outside of that game, there was never really. And Jake, do you remember a time where it was like, oh man, they just can't stop?
It was the Chiefs, because they just put 6 in the box the whole game and said, if you want to run, fine, you can have it, and they just gave it to him.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah. So, but that doesn't apply here because the offenses are much different.
No, it doesn't.
With all due respect to the Titans. I mean, there haven't been, many times where I was worried about the run defense this year. And it starts with DJ Reader, right, at nose. He's playing great. I can't believe he wasn't a Pro Bowler or a Pro Bowl alternate. And so starts there. The linebackers have played much better this year. Logan Wilson has taken a step forward. Jermaine Pratt has taken a big step forward. And so you look at those two guys. Sam Hubbard on the opposite side of Trey Hendrickson is really good in the run game. And these cornerbacks are good tacklers as well. And we were talking about it on our show, Tyler, going up against Derrick Henry. It's not just, the interior defensive line. Like, he's going to get out to the edges, and all of these, the front 7 and the secondary, all these guys are going to have to be ready to go and ready to gang tackle. So they're going to be tested for sure on Saturday.
Well, the last question that I have for you guys before we move on to the next part of the conversation is just about the pass coverage. I watched a couple of games for the Bengals, but you guys watched every game and obviously are breaking it down on a daily basis and doing a great job there. What I saw from the Bengals was a lot of man coverage, a lot of cover 3, a little bit of cover 2 mixed in there. Does that kind of fit their profile, or what do the Bengals prefer to do with their coverages on defense?
That's a very week-to-week thing, I would say. I think a lot like the Titans, you're going to see the Titans do different things. I know they play a little bit more single high than 2 high, but it looks like they do a little bit of both. And I would not say that they're a cover 3 team the way the Raiders are a cover 3 team by any stretch of the imagination. I would say the Bengals are the same. Against the Raiders twice this year, I think they've played probably more man than they played the rest of the year when they've been a more zone-heavy team. And I think they really are. It's cliche. I think they're a truly multiple group. I think that their corners are a little bit better in zone outside of Chidobe Awuzie, who I think can play in zone or man equally well. And I think that their safeties, Von Bell and Jesse Bates, both are relatively flexible, although, we were also talking about it with respect to Derrick Henry and run defense more than coverage. But, Jesse Bates is a guy that if you see him in the box and you're the Titans, you're probably going to try to run at him. And the Raiders punish that a couple times as well. But both those guys are pretty admirable in their jobs. From a scheme perspective, though, they're going to be pretty variable, I would say, in the secondary in terms of what they do. They're going to try to confuse Tannehill and muddy the picture for him. I know he's a veteran at this point, but it looks like he's had some ball security issues this year at the very least. I looked like one Texans game in particular was a bit egregious in terms of putting the ball in harm's way. But, I think that the Bengals will try to change the picture post snap, but to me, it's a game script game. Tyler, I know you asked specifically about coverage, but to me, it's a huge, both these teams really want to play with the lead game so they can do what they want to do on offense.
Right.